School Funding Issues Project by Jana Lapozansky, Rachel Lattis, and Morgan Richmond. Each year, the U.S. federal government distributes a certain amount of money to each state's educational systems. This money is most often given to the state, but can also be given directly to districts. In 2014, $141 billion of the federal government's budget went toward education. This is about 4% of the entire budget in the United States. The money the educational systems use comes from 3 different sources. These sources include the federal revenue, state revenue, and local revenue. Out of the 3 different sources of revenue each state's educational system uses, only 8% comes from the state's federal government. The other 92% comes from local and state revenue. These 2 revenues are split almost in half. Each state uses their own formula to determine how they distribute the money the federal government has given them. In Illinois, the percentage of funding remaining after 7.8% from federal funding should be half of each other. However, it is clear to see that local funding accounts for almost 3 times the amount of state funding. The reliability on local funding shows Illinois' inability to distribute their money properly and choose how each districts get their money. The Education Trust conducted a study and found that Illinois has the most inequitable school funding system across the nation. Until earlier this year, Illinois was one of the last states in the country whose education funding system relied almost entirely on property taxes, Lauren Camera stated in an article titled "State Education Finance System Takes Center Stage." This formula left the poorer districts with less funding than the districts with higher property taxes. This chart from 2016 shows how local funding, the property taxes, has more influence on education than state funding.
After years of arguing over what is the best solution to this problem, a compromise was reached on August 27, 2017. Efforts to end inequities in Illinois' school funding scheme have been attempted for decades, with supporters saying they were trying to bring fairness to a system so dependent upon real estate taxes and property values that the quality of schools was often determined by zip code. Previous attempts failed largely because they would have created winners and losers among school districts. Wealthier suburban school districts are loath to give up even the small portion of state aid they receive, according to Pearson and Garcia in an article titled "Rauner Win on School Bills Comes at a Price." The wealthier school districts didn't want to give up their funding because their students' academic achievement granted them better opportunities and resources. Even though it is seen as a positive that these wealthier districts were having stable academic achievement, it was not viewed this way from the poorer districts. Every child in Illinois should have access to a high-quality education regardless of their zip code, Culver stated. This is more than an education funding problem, it is a civil rights issue. It was time for a change in the formula because funding should not be determined by a zip code. Using a zip code to determine how much funding is given creates inequity. The inequity seen most often is through achievement gap. Those schools who are receiving less funding have little wiggle room when it comes to purchases that would benefit the school and the students' learning. The money is not often spent on materials for the classroom, which puts teachers in a tough place. Teachers often have to fish money out of their own pockets to buy materials for their classrooms because the students themselves could not afford to do so. Governor Rauner was against the original legislation because he felt that it was just a bailout for Chicago public schools. Rauner said he also vetoed the original legislation because there was a chance that there would be no plan to distribute the general state education aid. Under the new formula, every school district will receive the same amount of money no matter what.
Rauner had demanded that CPS accept either continued funding for a long-awarded block grant for special programs or a state pickup of pension funding. Under the law he signed, CPS will get both. This was one of the compromises that Rauner had to make when it came to the new law because his veto was being overlooked by other representatives. At least $350 million will be given to each district under the new law. Choosing to distribute the money equally rather than basing it on property taxes allows all students to have the opportunity to receive a good education. Rauner told reporters the tax credit gives an opportunity for more school choice for low-income families who would like the opportunity to choose a school the way higher-income families can. Allowing lower-income families the opportunity to choose what school they attend creates opportunities for those children to attend schools that will still provide a good education. This encourages students to do better and feel less segregated from the higher-income families in schools. It is not perfect, but is this a moment that we should all grab and we should all take a hold of and we should all celebrate together, understanding that there is work to do and there is accountability that has to take place afterwards? The answer is absolutely, without question in my mind, said State Senator Andy Manar. Even though the new formula may not be perfect, it is a step closer to creating better education for all. The law can be further improved by having the state give the poor districts technological advancements in the form of donations. The state should also provide training for those using the donated technologies in order to ensure that they are being used to their full potential. Providing both of these allows schools to provide a better academic environment to not only the students but the teachers themselves. Looking into the future, many school districts will always be working on ways to improve this law. According to Pearson and Garcia, supporters said lawmakers should focus on the larger goal of the bill, to invest more state money into schools over time, with the most funding first going to the poorest districts. They also pointed to a windfall for CPS. Hopefully this law is just a stepping stone on the path toward creating a better funding plan and creating equal educational opportunities for students across Illinois and the nation.